People have to work hard to become the champion. All you have to do is pick up the microphone and introduce yourself. Welcome to the show, John. Let's roll back the years, John. The year is 1984. Lionel Richie is topping the charts. Ian Botham is wreaking havoc for the Ashes series. India is 1 year old with the World Cup trophy. Take us through the years of 1984 when you began in cricket commentary.
I got my start in broadcasting through cricket, which has always been a really favourite sport of mine, as I'm sure it is of yours as well. And I was 19 years old. I hadn't done particularly well at school. And so my academic results weren't good enough to go to university. So I resolved that I would have a year to myself trying to sort my life out. So I wanted to go travelling, but I needed some money to go travelling. So I got myself a job at the British Lending Library, which is a very august institution in the north of England, which deals in finding, this is pre-internet, finding obscure articles, periodicals, magazines for researchers and academics around the world. So someone from a university somewhere in India, for example, could write to the British Library and say, I need something on a specific aspect of engineering that was written in 1932. Can you find it for us? And my job would be to go and find the article, photocopy it, put it in an envelope and send it to that person in India who had requested it. So it was a fairly menial task. At times it was quite interesting, but it did allow me to earn some money, which I was then going to use to buy a round the world ticket, which eventually I did with Qantas, the Australian airline, and I had a wonderful time. But the nub of the story is that one day in this year of trying to find myself, I played in a cricket match in my home city of York one day and got a few runs and retired to the bar afterwards with all my teammates, which is fairly traditional. And halfway through, the payphone, this was even before mobile phones, the payphone in the corner of the clubhouse rang, and it was the local radio station. A BBC station wanted to interview me about my innings that day. So by this stage, I was about 3 beers into what was becoming a very convivial evening. So I went across and answered the questions from the radio station, went back and had a couple more beers, forgot all about it, and went home. And then 2 weeks later, there was a phone call at home from the sports editor of this newly established BBC local radio station saying, we were interested to hear you on the radio a couple of weeks ago. You sounded very fluent. Well, that was probably more to do with the beer than the correspondent. But it led to them saying that they were looking for some people to report on football and rugby that upcoming winter. There was no money in it, but they thought I might be suitable and would I enjoy doing it? So I had nothing better to do with my life at the time. So I said yes. And I went off to a few football and rugby matches in subsequent weekends. And it all seemed to go quite smoothly. And another 6 weeks down the line, there was another phone call at home. And it was the manager of the radio station this time saying, look, we think you've got something here. If you're interested in making a career out of broadcasting, we're prepared to support you. However, if you want to join the BBC, you need to be a graduate. So you have to go off. It doesn't matter what the degree course is. You have to go off and find somewhere where you can study for 3 years to a higher level, maybe mature a little as a human being, which we all know those years between 18, 19 and 21, 22. There are big changes in how you are as a human and your view of the world and your approach to it. So I managed at very short notice to get a place at a teacher training college, a Catholic teacher training college in the city of Leeds, studying communication and cultural studies with public media, which would now just be a media degree, but there were elements of psychology and sociology. And the agreement with the BBC was that I would do this course. They would give me work to do at weekends, going out and about reporting and starting to learn how to commentate. And as long as I trained on satisfactorily, they would find me a job at the end of the 3 years of university. And in fact, what happened was that after about a year, I was getting phone calls from the BBC saying, we said you've got to be a graduate to join us. Well, we've changed our minds. You can have a job now if you want. And I was fairly resolute and said, no, I need this qualification. Now I've started it because I don't know whether broadcasting is going to work out for me. So I completed the course. And about 6 weeks before my finals, there was a phone call in my hall of residence at university. And I went to pick up the phone, and it was a very prim and proper lady from the BBC in London. So the conversation went something like this. I picked up the phone and she said, hello, is that John Champion? I said, yes, it is, speaking. She said, hello, it's Miss Jackson from the Human Resources Department at the British Broadcasting Corporation in London, W1 Portland Place. I'm calling about the job. And I said, you're going to have to tell me a little more about this. What job? No, the job. I said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to enlighten me. The job that we put you in for an interview for, there's a sports reporter's position coming up in a city called Leeds. I believe it's in the northern portion of the country. There is an interview at 3:00 on Friday. We've put you down. These are the questions we're going to ask you. And these are the answers we would like you to reproduce. So basically, she was telling me what the interview questions were going to be, what the answers were that I needed to come up with. So it was a stitch up. So her parting gesture was, okay, we've got you down, 3:00 Friday. Don't forget to wear a tie. Bye-bye. And with that, she put the phone down. So I turned up at the interview with a tie, parroted the answers to the questions that I knew were coming, and got the job. And 6 weeks later, I was off and running as a fully fledged member of the BBC staff at a local radio station in Leeds. I did that for 18 months, and then I was offered a job by national radio down in London, which included working on the World Service as well. And then from there, gradually, I went across from BBC Radio to BBC Television, and the TV side of my career was born as well.
So you could say the loss of cricket is the gain of football. What are your memories of Vivian Richards, Kapil Dev, Jeff Thompson, Bob Willis and Ian Botham?
Yes, I mean, my memories of those are of watching these stellar figures as a child, really, and then as a teenager growing up, that just were the dominant figures in cricket at the time. To be at Headingley, as I was the day that Geoffrey Boycott scored his 100th 100 in a test match against Australia, to be at Headingley 4 years later for Botham in the Ashes and Willis 8 for 43 coming down the hill from the Kirkstall Lane end were just thrilling moments which resonate with me even now. And you say that cricket's loss was football's gain. It's very kind of you to say that. But in fact, I was a commentator on Test Match Special on the BBC for 3 years later on in my career. So I have commentated on cricket, and to work with people like Sunil Gavaskar, with Vivian Richards, Sir Vivian Richards, with Jeff Thompson, the great Australian fast bowler, was one of the other great thrills of my career. That was one of the most enjoyable roles I think I've ever had in broadcasting, doing Test cricket, because of the space on the radio that you have as a broadcaster to paint pictures, which is the very antithesis of what I do on a weekly basis on the TV, of course, because the pictures are painted for you. All you can do is augment a particular moment. Whereas cricket on the radio, I think as a broadcaster, is probably the ultimate luxury.
Well, you've been working in broadcast for 4 decades now. Who's been your favorite partner in crime?
It would be impossible to pick one because, and that's not me dodging the question, it's just they're so different. So I'll give you a selection of some of the names I've been lucky enough to work with on a regular basis in the commentary box. So going back to my days on BBC Radio, I mean, Jim Beglin was one of the early people I worked with on the radio. And of course, we then enjoyed a long partnership on TV as well. I think elsewhere in my career, I worked with Sir Trevor Brooking on BBC Television, which was great. He was such a gentleman and a lovely companion. I worked with Ron Atkinson, the former Manchester United manager, on ITV when I joined them to do the Champions League. And he was flamboyant. We would call a game wherever it was around the UK, usually in the Champions League midweek. And then he always had a driver who was a former nightclub bouncer called Bobo, who he'd met when he was the manager of Sheffield Wednesday, who would drive him everywhere. And as you went back to your car, I would be driving myself home, but Bobo would be driving Big Ron, as he was universally known. And he would motion to Bobo to open the boot of the car. And there would always be a crate of champagne in the back of the car, and he would hand you a bottle to take home at the end of the night. So I enjoyed that. I mentioned Jim Beglin in a radio context. Obviously, I can't not mention him in a TV context, and also within Pro Evolution Soccer, because he was my partner on that for many of my 8 years. And then more recently, I seem to have stumbled upon a happy partnership with Ali McCoist, the former Scotland and Rangers striker. We had a very enjoyable World Cup with ITV in 2018 in Russia, and we now call some Premier League games together for Amazon in the UK. And in America, I mean, my great new adventure is working over there on a regular basis, and I have a gentleman called Taylor Twellman, who is very American, used to be the centre forward for the US national team, and is a very different but equally talented broadcaster. So in no way dodging your request for me to name one, I couldn't. But if I put those 5 names in the frame, they would be the ones that resonate the most with me, because I've worked the most with them, I think.
Well, in India, the fans remember your 1996 Champions League final, and your partner then was Peter Drury. What are your memories of that particular night in the final between Ajax versus Juventus?
I remember it because we had a very enjoyable trip to Rome, where the final was being played in the Stadio Olimpico. I remember that I lost my accreditation trying to get into the stadium, which caused a minor panic at the last moment. I remember Peter and I sitting next to each other calling the game. I remember we went for a walk on the morning of the match and we went to the Vatican. And Peter and I were strolling along and suddenly someone shouted out, "Oi, hello." And we turned around and it was Howard Kendall, who was without question the greatest manager that Everton have ever had and a wonderful player as well. And he was with his girlfriend and it was his 50th birthday and she'd taken him on a surprise trip to Rome. So they were sightseeing. And then I think his girlfriend had arranged for a match ticket as well. So I've got very happy memories. And it was lovely to work alongside Peter because we've been lifelong friends. We are godfathers to each other's children. We came through at the same local radio station. And in fact, he took my job in Leeds with the BBC when I moved to London to work for national radio. So it was very nice to work alongside each other because, of course, that's the one thing that never happens, that we do the same commentary on the same game for the same TV station. It just can't happen because there's only one play-by-play and neither of us are a renowned former professional footballer. So we can't play the role of the colour analyst.
Well, the Indian fans are absolutely delighted and fortunate to have two of the greatest commentators, you and Peter Drury. What do you have to say about that?
It's very kind of you to say that. I think we would both acknowledge that we've been extremely fortunate in the opportunities that have come our way.
What is your favorite memory in the last 4 decades that can be the headline of a Netflix series?
I was lucky enough to do 3 Olympic Games. So watching Muhammad Ali, riven by Parkinson's disease, trying to light the Olympic flame is a sight that will remain with me forever. One of the most emotional things I've ever seen. I think watching Cathy Freeman, the Australian athlete, win gold at the Sydney Olympics as an Aboriginal in Australia was so symbolic. There are many moments on the football pitch that I would look back on and think that's just extraordinary. And there are other moments that stay with me for the wrong reasons as well. So to be walking through Centennial Park in Atlanta during the Olympic Games when the bomb went off and seeing the after effects of that and the sheer panic is something that stayed with me. Being in Madrid for a Champions League game when at the height of the Basque separatists, ETA, and their reign of terror in Spain, a bomb went off outside our hotel. Being at White Hart Lane for an FA Cup quarter-final in 2013, when Fabrice Muamba suffered a cardiac arrest on the pitch and having to be the person that relayed that experience on live television with no real help from anywhere else because we had so little information. I mean, all those memories were brought flooding back at the Euros with what happened to poor Christian Eriksen in the summer. So you'll see that my answers are not just stellar football matches. They are life experiences, really. Often, many of them not directly connected to the actual sport.
How has the game changed in the Premier League in the last 4 decades and certainly the fandom?
I mean, fandom has changed. Society has changed, though, as well. You know, this is now, 29 years of the Premier League. So that's a long time in the span of a nation, any nation, the world. And so much changes. So I think what I've seen, having worked on the old First Division pre-Premier League, is just the game returning to the centre of national life in the United Kingdom. So let's not forget that when the Premier League was set up in 1992, football was still in the doghouse. It was still a sport of which government was suspicious. Not the actual game itself, but the followers of it, because we'd had these horrendous experiences like Hillsborough, the FA Cup semi-final disaster, Heysel. We had fans who were fenced in to keep them off the pitch. And Margaret Thatcher, when she was Prime Minister, was wanting to be much more draconian in the way that she treated football fans. So there's been a gentrification, I think, of football now, and it's become the sexy thing to be associated with. So if in the 1980s, you wanted to be seen out and about at a fashionable place and you were a member of London high society, you'd go to the opera or the theatre. Now you try and get a ticket for Chelsea or Arsenal or Tottenham or whoever else it might be. So that's been the biggest change, I think. But the core fundamental football followers, I don't think have changed that much because they are still as in love with the game as they always were. To take Newcastle for an example, I think Newcastle are a wonderful example of what football fandom can be and should be. Yes, they've had a rocky ride. It'll be interesting to see what the future holds under Saudi ownership. Not everyone is entirely happy for obvious reasons about that. But what it does give Newcastle, a one-club city, is enormous hope for the future. And hope is the biggest currency of the football fan. And I know you're going to ask me later on about the European Super League. That removes a lot of hope for a lot of fans. So for me, the fundamentals are still there, but the packaging of the Premier League is just so much more glitzy and glamorous. And whereas the old First Division was a sports league, now the Premier League is, yes, a sports league, but it's a daily soap opera as well. And that's why we all love it so much.
Now, moving on to the Champions League draw blunder. Do you think that could have been handled better?
I think it was probably a fairly juvenile act. I mean, UEFA obviously use outside contractors for all sorts of things, and they found themselves in a very difficult position, an impossible position, really. Once you've had one draw and it's as public as that was, what on earth do you do in that situation? So whilst I don't feel natural sympathy for UEFA in many situations, I've got a little bit this time, but surely they should have had checks and balances in place to make sure that this chaotic situation could never have arisen. So, I mean, it was more farce than football. It doesn't reflect particularly well on anyone, and it leaves everyone frustrated. So when I got off my plane at Heathrow Airport and switched on my phone and started reading about this, my first thought was to chuckle about it. And then actually I was quite sad about it when I thought it through.
Well, understandably, Perez is upset. Is that justified?
I think, yes, he's right to criticise. I just think he's got an agenda, having been one of the founding fathers of the Super League and still subscribed to the idea of a Super League. I mean, it makes his position almost untenable, given the structure of European football at the moment and the club that he represents being at the very heart of that, both historically and currently. So I take it with a significant pinch of salt, because any opportunity to bash UEFA, Perez is going to be at the front of the queue at the moment. So yes, he was probably right in a lot of what he said, but I think you have to take into account his motivation as well.
Well, was it fair for all the teams?
No, but then what do you do? It was never going to be a fair situation once they decided that the first draw was a complete blunder. So no one was ever going to be satisfied. No one was ever going to be totally happy. Some people came out rather better. Some people came out rather worse. But I don't think that you could argue that the draw did need to be redone. So I think everyone just has to sit on their hands and accept it.
Well, like millions of other fans, were you looking forward to the Messi-Ronaldo contest?
I mean, potentially it is. But I tend to look at games not through individual personalities, but through the teams that are involved. So it's a battle, actually, I have in America, because they love to sell all their events through the stars. So if you watch an NFL game, it's sold because Tom Brady is playing. If you watch the NBA, it's the fact that LeBron James is involved. So I think I understand why people would want to sell that game that came out first time round as Messi against Ronaldo. Of course you would. But I would prefer to view it as a wonderful football team against another very good football team and take the wider context. So, yeah, Messi, Ronaldo would have been nice. We may still get it further down the line. Who knows? We'll certainly see it once or twice more, I think, before they both lace up their boots for the final time.
Well, moving back to England, the combination of Harry Kane and Gareth Southgate is brilliant, is shaping up well. Do you think we are on the cusp of something great at Qatar?
I think they're in the conversation to get to the very tail end of a World Cup and go, one stage better than they did in Russia. I think the vagaries of a World Cup, the things that can derail you, are such that you can never say with any great confidence that any team is going to go all the way. But I think that they are now equipped, whereas I've been to many World Cups in the past where England there was just no way. They weren't going to get anywhere near the final. And you could say that with a degree of confidence. Now you can't. You can say they've got all the tools that they need to win the World Cup. Now, will things fall their way? We'll only know when we all get to Doha. But they are capable of doing it. And I think that's the big difference. And for that, I mean, yes, Harry Kane deserves a lot of credit, but in particular, Southgate, because he is the leader of men. He's the man that's changed the tone around the national team in England, so that now people, rather than shrugging their shoulders and saying, they're not good enough, the players only want to play for their clubs. Now there is a real commitment to the national team, which has grown over the last World Cup and then the last Euros. And that's the big sea change. And it coincides with a generational supply of talent, which takes England to a level beyond which they've been before.
Well, we have Gareth Southgate, who brings a sense of calmness in the entire world of football in an era which is dominated by Klopp and Mourinho. What do you think makes him so special?
I think just that he's a normal human being. If he was involved in this conversation, he'd take a full part in it. He wouldn't be playing the big I am. I've got 59 caps for England and I've led them to a World Cup semi-final and the final of the Euros. He'd just be very happy to talk about football or indeed cricket, because he's a huge cricket fan as well. And I've seen him at Lord's before now when I've made my annual pilgrimage to watch one of the test matches. I just think he is a very down-to-earth, humble individual who was clever enough to recognise that there was a major disconnect between the English football public and the national team, because they were seen as swanky superstars on huge salaries who were divorced from reality. And he's brought the two parties together. So now there's a common cause between the team and those that support the team. I've had Gareth as my co-commentator on World Cups and Euros before now, and he's the most pleasurable individual to be with. And you can talk to him about any topic under the sun, not just sports. So I think that broader perspective has helped him, and he has certainly helped the England team.
Well, this is on you. How much time, John, do you spend on pronunciation of the players?
A lot. So I'll always talk to maybe a commentator from, if I'm doing a Champions League game and it's an Italian team, I'll ring my Italian counterpart and we'll have a conversation. I think it's very important that you need to show that respect to the athletes in any sport and pronounce their names as correctly as you can. I do think there are exceptions to that. So if you have a player like Pepe of Portugal, who is really Pep, but when he started his career, whoever was commentating on him didn't get the correct pronunciation, and it didn't become clear until later that he was actually Pep rather than Pepe, by which time the whole world knew him as Pepe. So if you suddenly start calling him Pep, you look a bit of an idiot. So I think you have to be sensible about the whole thing. You mentioned Christian Pulisic, and in America, it is Pulisic. It should be Pulisic because of his Croatian ancestry. But in America, it's Pulisic. And if you said Pulisic or Pulisic, they would say, you've got it wrong, guy. You got the whole thing wrong. He's Pulisic. So apologies for my dreadful accent. So, you need to do the research. I think you have to be respectful, but it is a bit of a minefield at times as well. One of the best things that the Premier League does, for those of us that commentate on their games periodically, is that they go around and they film what they call the green screen, which is the player doing a walk-on that all the broadcasters use in their team graphics at the start of the season. And they also put a microphone in front of them and say, how should we be pronouncing your name? So you can be fairly reliant that the pronunciations on Premier League broadcasts around the world are correct.
Well, this is on Manchester United. Ralph Rangnick has just taken over as the manager. Do you think he'll be successful?
I'm full of admiration for Ralph Rangnick and what he's achieved. I'm just not certain that he is a fit for Manchester United. They need someone to sort out a mess, and maybe he's the man to do that. And perhaps he just stays the 6 months and he achieves that. But Manchester United, to me, are at their happiest when they're playing cavalier football. And Ralph Rangnick's football is not cavalier. It's pragmatic. It's thought through. There is a lot to admire about it. But it's not the free-flowing game that Manchester United fans are so accustomed to. And of course, they're yearning a return to the Ferguson era, a return to 1-0 down with 2 minutes to play and they'll win 2-1, to Fergie time, to, OK, we'll let you score 3, but we're going to score 5. That's what I was brought up on watching Manchester United, and what many of them were as well. And I don't think they're going to get that with Ralph Rangnick. So it's a question of what you prioritise, I think, in terms of his appointment. Is it a question of stabilising the ship and laying a platform for another manager to come in and put his stamp on? Maybe it is, in which case Rangnick's a good choice. If it's, here's 6 months and we might well extend you and you could be the long-term manager, I'm not so sure that that would have a happy ending.
India cannot be complete without cricket. What are your views on 3 of the greatest cricketers India has produced? Sunil Gavaskar, Sachin Tendulkar and Virat Kohli.
Okay. I can talk with most authority probably about Sachin Tendulkar because, and I think Peter may have mentioned this to you, Peter Drury, we were both lucky enough to be working in Yorkshire when Sachin was playing for Yorkshire. So we dealt with him, we talked to him, we got to know him a little bit, and that was lovely. And what a player. The other 2, I mean, Gavaskar, just the king of opening batsmen, just unflappable. And he made a big impression on me because of the age I was when I was watching him. So that's my favourite era of cricket. I think it is probably for all of us, where we knew the date of birth of every player. We knew their current first-class average. we knew the meaningful statistics that they'd achieved in the game. So for me, Gavaskar is part of that. And then Kohli, I mean, what an example to cricketers right around the world. I think to shoulder the hopes of such a vast and fervent cricket nation and to perform at the level that he has, I'm full of admiration. So for different reasons, they all resonate with me.
Well, you've been a cricket correspondent for several years. In your opinion, do you think Virat Kohli's captaincy fiasco was handled badly?
Yeah, I do. But these things happen in professional sport. You know, we talked earlier in our conversation about the UEFA draw. There are lots of things that shouldn't happen that do happen. But do you know the great thing about sports at whatever level around the world? The things that shouldn't happen provide us with talking points. They provide us with barroom conversation. And I think that's the most wonderful thing about sport. There's something that occupy the spare areas of our mind, and it enhances our lives so much.
Well, thank you for the delightful conversation, John. Now we move on to our most exciting part of the program, which is the fan interaction. We've got fans from all across the country who've gathered and are waiting to ask questions. Over to you, fans.
We all know how much Christian Pulisic means to all the Chelsea fans around the world, especially the fans from the United States. So my question to you is, since you work with the United States fan base, how exactly is Christian Pulisic perceived there?
I hope he's got strong shoulders because he's carrying the hopes of a huge nation on them, particularly a nation that knows that it's co-hosting a World Cup in 2026. So everything that Pulisic does is analysed in the most minute detail by the American soccer public. So NBC are the Premier League broadcasters in America. And every week I turn on my TV if I'm in my apartment in Boston to watch the Premier League game of the moment. Quite often it's Chelsea. And even if he's not starting the game, all the focus is on Christian Pulisic. When will he come on? Why is Tuchel not starting him? This is anti-American. How can he develop his career to the level that he deserves? All these questions are posed on a weekly basis because there is a borderline obsession with Christian Pulisic, because there is the potential that he could become the first really big American soccer, to use their word, superstar. The potential, but he's a long way short of that at the moment. So a lot of American football fans are living their dream through Christian Pulisic. So there is this very intense focus on him on a weekly basis, even when he's not playing. So I wouldn't want to be him in that context because so much is expected of him.
Hi, John. It's a privilege to be able to ask you this question. In recent times, we've seen two legends of the game, Wayne Rooney and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, playing the MLS in the later stages of their career. How different do you think Rooney's contribution was compared to that of Zlatan?
Not in the same manner, because he's not a showman in the same way. I think it was embraced for the fact that he put everything into his time with DC United in the nation's capital, because there have been, as we all know, instances of aging European players going to Major League Soccer, not really lifting a leg, not really putting in the requisite effort, and maybe collecting $6 or $7 million a year for that and all the sponsorship elements that come with being in American pro sports. So it's very lucrative for them. But I think you couldn't level that at Rooney. He gave the same amount of commitment on a daily basis to playing for DC United as he did when he was at his peak at Manchester United. And he was very good with the young players as well. So if you go to DC United now, no one has a bad word to say about Wayne Rooney. They wished that he had seen his contract out and they'd got the full time period, but they understood that other opportunities came his way at Derby, which have now led to him becoming a manager. So they get that. So I think everyone would be overwhelmingly positive about Wayne Rooney's contribution to Major League Soccer. And he was also part of something, without getting too deeply into it, the changing nature of that particular league. It's not now the retirement league for aging European superstars. It's now the league for up-and-coming young South American talents, and also an increasingly impressive production line of young American players, many of whom have now come to Europe, the likes of Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, Christian Pulisic, all playing in the Champions League on a regular basis. So the nature of the league has changed, and Rooney was part of that.
Well, that was John Champion speaking exclusively on Footcast Social. This is me, Sunil Yashkalra, signing off from Footcast Social, a program that gets you bigger names every week, only on NewsX.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.